So what can I help you with today?
Yeah. Okay. You wrote to say that, there's a special session on dealing with the children of narcissists. I brought the matter up last week with my daughters, and so I was hoping to get some feedback from you. From my side, I got a message from my older daughter, the one who's her father's daughter. I got a message from her during the week to say, "Hi, Mom, thinking of you. Kind of, it would be nice to talk, despite our stuff, like kind of." And I just said, "Oh, thanks very much. I'm fine, hope you are well." So I just responded like that. I didn't communicate too much.
Right.
Yeah, my younger daughter hasn't been in touch with me. She's the one, I think, though I'm not making excuses for her, but she's kind of following the same path that her older sister is following. And it's kind of almost like uncharacteristic of her. Well, I think it's uncharacteristic. Maybe it's not. Maybe that's a character, and I just didn't see it in the past. I've read a lot, and I've been on sites on the internet, like about, people generally talking about their kids, and how they had to let go of them. And I think mine is a bit different in that most of those kids have kind of gone astray in a way, or they really abusive towards their parents, and they are also they're milking their parents. They want stuff and they want money, and they're takers. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so mine is different in that my daughters they're not takers. Yeah. It's just that we have this tension between us at the moment. And so so I thought what I will do is, at the time when she sent the message, I hadn't, thought of an appropriate response. But I don't want to just send a message kind of, "Oh, this is where I'm at." But I thought the next time I do get a message from either or any one of them, then I'll say, "Look, I'm in therapy at the moment." And I'll say I'm in therapy, and it's, and I'll I'll just mention that it's the therapy is about having been married to a narcissist, and having divorced a narcissist. And so it's my healing that I am finding through the therapy. And so therefore we can have social contact, but when we do have contact, I don't want to talk about stuff, as she calls it.
Stuff meaning the past?
Yeah, meaning like whatever the tension, they refer to the tension, as stuff, like kind of,
Right.
like quotes, So I want to say, look, we can talk, but we'll just talk about social things. I'm not happy. I'm not comfortable talking about stuff, and I don't want to talk about the father, and I don't want to talk about his estate. I don't want to talk about any of that stuff. But for the most part, I'm open to have social contact with him. So, that's what I thought I would do, so that they know where I'm at. I'm in therapy, and that's what I'm doing now. So I don't want any interferences with that. Yeah.
Right. So sort of like you'll explain that you realized you were in a relationship with a narcissist. That's why you're going through therapy. And for right now, during your healing process, it's better for you just not to talk about that for right now, right?
Correct.
Yeah, because you don't want to totally close the door for the future, right? Because you want them to understand that you do want to talk to them about it someday, right? When everybody's ready, but right now just isn't the time.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. That's exactly how I feel, and
Right.
and also I want to you see, hi Candy, see Candy is around.
Hi.
Can I just type a message to say hi Candy? So yeah, I also want to start triggering something with them in terms of narcissism, because I think that we are all aware of abusive relationships, and we just see it as an abusive relationship, and in fact with them they think, oh, maybe there was some abuse, but it wasn't a big deal because they didn't see it. I protected them. And I know that he has spread a lot of lies about me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm trying to almost like plant a seed in terms of saying, this wasn't normal, or not normal, because abuse is not normal. It's not regular abuse. This is narcissistic abuse. And for them, when I do get to talk to them about it, then at least they will have a sense. And I think they also have enough understanding, and also, the way they wired themselves, they will probably go and find out what is narcissistic abuse. And
Right.
if they haven't done that already, they are research type people.
Right.
So I know that they will go and research it. My one daughter is a journalist, and the other one, well, she studied sociology. So
Wow.
yeah, so they are people who are accustomed to, if they're not familiar with the concept, then they will go and research to find out, now what exactly does this mean.
Right.
And I'm hoping that they will find some answers through their own research, albeit at at maybe just a superficial level, but just so that they can get an understanding of what it is.
Right.
So that's why I'm telling them I'm in therapy, and this is what I'm dealing with.
That's good, because
So,
that's you taking responsibility for your path, and that's you saying, I accept that I was abused and this is what it was. It's called narcissistic abuse. And that way you're not trying to force it on them. You're letting them go to that, and they will. They're going to go to Google and start to look at that, and they're probably going to start to realize, oh wow, yeah, all those things that happened, now it's starting to make more sense. And then maybe on their own they can come to you and start to open the dialogue more about it.
So it's quite a process, and it might take a while.
Yes.
But at least it gives me the opportunity to just deal with me.
Right.
Because that's what's important to me now, is just being able to deal with me and my own healing. Because I've never done it before, as I told you. I only stumbled upon this the other day after, the abuser's death. I was like, wow, this is what I'd been going through. And if I'd known, it would have made such a big difference in my life.
Right.
And even today when I went to the library, because I wanted to go and get some books, because it's fine going on to the internet, but I'm more kind of a book person.
Mm-hmm.
And I was surprised that I couldn't find anything in the library on one, not even on abuse or on there were a few books on mental illness, but not much, not anything that would help me in any way. I walked away with 2 books from the library, but there's nothing really significant from what I can see, in those books. And I thought, it's actually such a common mental disorder, and especially in a country like South Africa, and I'm a person of color, and so we've been through. Sorry, I just had a bit of an interference here. And so, we have been living in a very violent society.
Right.
And by default, there was a lot of abuse inflicted on people of color, and especially Black men. And we all know the cycle of violence, how it perpetuates future violence. So in my community that I grew up, it was always there. It was almost it's the normal. It's not extraordinary. So men lashing out at their women. So So for me, when I went to the library and I was looking, for books, I didn't even find anything on, like just like living in abusive environment and living in an abusive society, or abusive relationships. There was nothing of the kind. Maybe I should go back and maybe request some books as opposed to just searching the shelves.
Right, they might be in a different location, but it also might be that they might not have a lot there. Maybe the bookstore might have more, because it's very modern, most of what's out there. And like what I noticed, I went to a university library. I was just looking at PTSD last year, and there was so little information. In fact, the shelves were mostly empty. I hadn't been to a library in years, and I think now so much is online that maybe, most people just aren't going to a library anymore. But most of the best books on narcissism, what I've noticed is they're recent, like within the last 5 to 10 years. So if the library isn't updating, their supply of books, then maybe they don't have much there.
Yeah, I noticed that even the book on all the books that they would have on psychotherapy or psychiatry, they were all like about 20 years old, the way I looked at it. I was like, this is not of any use to us really, because we've moved quite a long way from where we were 20 years ago. Especially in my country. But so I will go, I'll continue to look online. And then you also recommended some books in your email last week. Oh no, in your sessions, when you sent something about your sessions, and then you recommended some books there. So if I can't get it in my bookstores, then I'll see if I can get it online maybe. So I'll do that. But I have been reading quite a bit, and I'm feeling a lot lighter, and I'm feeling a lot better.
Good.
I also I'm trying to guard against not having it consume my life. The whole concept of now doing this whole research and trying to get to grips with it. So it's actually hard, because I go to sleep with it and I wake up in the morning with it, and during the day I find myself, engrossed in thinking about it, and so I'm also, kind of guarding against it and saying to myself, look, it's not good to be consumed by it. It's good to do the research. It's good to read about it. It's good to know what the problem is. But
I'm so sorry. Can you hold on a second? I need to close my window. There's a lawn machine outside. It's going to make a lot of noise. I'll be right back. Okay, so sorry about that.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I'm trying to just lead a regular normal life, if you like,
Right.
without this whole matter consuming me. And I've been pretty successful in, saying, okay, cut that now, because they like tapes playing themselves over and over again. So, yeah, I've been pretty okay on that front. It's just what is outstanding now is, the communication with my daughters.
Right.
But at the same time, I don't want to just, I want to make it a response. I don't want to make it a statement that comes from me. I want to make it a response to something that they may put on the table, even if it's just, hi, mom.
Right. Letting them reach out to you.
Yeah. I don't know if you maybe want to just think about that, and say, look, just put it out and not make it a response, and maybe just advise me on that.
So going back to what you're saying about, thinking about it a lot and whatnot, I think in the initial phases of like right after you realize what happened, right, that it was abuse, that it was narcissistic abuse, that person was a narcissist, or in someone else's case, a psychopath or sociopath, at first there is that obsession. Like you can't think about anything else. Like you think about it all the time. You're researching it all the time. You want to talk about it all the time because you're trying to make sense of things. It's like your whole worldview just gets flipped upside down, and suddenly like everything is starting to make sense, but you still need to kind of like work it out in your mind. And I think that's the part of the PTSD or the CPTSD that's different, in the case of narcissistic abuse versus in the case of other forms of trauma that can cause PTSD, where the person, and I've noticed this like across the board, people are like obsessed with it. And I was too. And like, you're just dying to talk to people about it. And I think that something really helpful in those initial phases is, to set aside specific time during the day when you're going to allow yourself to think about it all you want, to focus on it all you want, but it's specific hours of the day. From this time to this time, I give myself permission to research, to talk about it, to think about it, everything about it. And then at this hour, I'm going to put that aside and I'm going to go do something else. And I think it's really, really key to do that. That way you're keeping it in a specific compartment in your life and you're not allowing it to bleed through everything else. And in the initial phases, that's going to be a bigger chunk of time because there's so much to work out. And then, down the road, it becomes like less and less, and maybe, less time per day. And then maybe it's only every other day. And, and then it eventually becomes less and less that you think about it and need to obsess about it. But, that obsession is like, you're still trying to understand something. You're still trying to work something out. And so allowing yourself to have that time, but to create a very safe boundary around that. So like, this is the time that's dedicated to that. And then this rest of the time is mine to build something for the future, to focus on something that I love, on some passion, some purpose, like something like that. And then, regarding your daughters, I think you have a very good perspective about that, which is, not to put it, in their face or anything, to take the responsibility and say, I'm going through therapy because I realized I was in a narcissistically abusive relationship with your father. This is what I'm working on. And then leave it at that and let them, go in and research that. And then maybe they'll come to you down the road and say, Mom, I was looking online and I noticed that. And I was thinking about dad and I was thinking about how dad did that. And then maybe they start to like open the dialogue with you. But I think you're totally right to just put it out there, to plant that seed, and to keep the door open, in communication for them, but to let them come to you. It's really the safest thing, especially, if they're still in the Stockholm syndrome, because even though he's dead, they can still be in that Stockholm syndrome to the idea of who he was and what he represented in their life. And it's very, very complicated to interrupt that cycle before a person is ready. And I've gotten myself into that mistake with friends before. I've seen friends in abusive relationships and I've tried to tell them and wake them up, and ended up getting attacked, like not just by my friend, but by their abuser, like, how dare you say those things about me and stuff like that. And even though the abuser isn't alive in your situation, it's very complicated. until the person is ready to see it, you can't force them. It's like you can bring the horse to the water, but you can't force them to drink the water. All you can do is show them the water and let them make the decision on their own free will, and hope for the best, and I'm sure your daughters are going to figure it out at some point. And my caution with your youngest daughter is that, if I remember from last week, you mentioned that it seems like the oldest daughter has more of the narcissistic traits and the youngest daughter not. And it could be that, a lot of times what happens is the abuser gets the golden child to abuse or to sympathize with their abuse against the scapegoat. And so your daughter might be, playing those mind games with your youngest daughter, and she could be confusing her, against thinking things against you, or getting her to sympathize against you as the scapegoat now, or something complicated like this. So be cautious that could be what's happening. Like it could be that she's just confused right now.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with you. I think that is exactly what's happening, because she's almost displaying a typical narcissistic behavior pattern here, because she causes the storm. She didn't cause the storm with me. She caused it with my younger daughter, and my younger daughter responded in a disrespectful manner towards me. Yeah. Right. And that's when I shut the door. Yeah. Right. On both of them. Yeah. And so now she's reaching out, the older one, the innocent right. instigator.
Right. Yeah? And she's going to try to manage the communication so that the younger daughter has to go through her to get to you. So you want to be very cautious about those dynamics so that your younger daughter doesn't feel excluded, that she feels that you're open to her and that you're not blaming her for anything, anything like that.
Yeah. So I can almost see the game that my older daughter is playing, She's the nice one now. She's like, "Hi, Mom, thinking of you. Hi, Mom, how you doing?" Yeah. And then there's just silence from my younger daughter. But that's also my younger daughter's nature. She's not... My older daughter, when she walks into a room, you notice her. She's very much out there, yeah. And the younger one, she's very much into herself. She doesn't, put stuff out there. And so
introverted.
She's the introvert, yeah, and the older one is the extrovert, yeah. Right. And so my younger one doesn't really open up to her emotions as well. Like, for example, when her dad and I first separated, I had her in therapy every week, and it was costing me a fortune. And she would just sit there and not say anything to the therapist, And as well, later, she's okay. And now when her dad died, she asked me, "Oh, do I know of a good therapist that, she could go and see?" So she's in therapy, yeah. And she talks about the fact that she's in therapy. But she's still, she's very private.
Right.
She's extremely private, to the point where they each have a room in my house. But if I have a guest and the guest takes her room, and I say, "Oh, you can come and sleep in my room," she would sooner be uncomfortable on the couch than come and sleep in my bed with me. Whereas my older daughter is different, she'll come and sleep in my bed. Yeah. So she's very, and she was always, since she was a baby, she was like that, very private. Yeah. So that's her nature. Yeah. And the older one is almost taking advantage of that. Yeah. So I'm mindful of it. And so when I communicate, I will communicate with both of them and say, "Look, this is where I'm at." And they can both, because they also have to deal with the fact that their father was a narcissist.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Even if he didn't lash out at them.
Certainly, it left psychological scars on them.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to influence their relationship with him, because I've never done it in the past. In fact, they would complain to me about him. And, I would just, sometimes I would actually say, well, in his defense, I would say, so I would almost not protect him, but sometimes he was right. Yeah, he wasn't always wrong. And I would say, well, in his defense, this is my opinion. And I think, that you guys are being unfair now. I just once with his partner, I mentioned to my daughter that he had assaulted his partner, his life partner, and that she had him locked up. And my older daughter then said, oh, that woman is really stupid, or something to that effect. And I said, well, what she did may have been silly or stupid, but what he did was criminal.
Right.
Because I wanted her to understand the difference between, maybe she did something, I don't know what it is, but that's no excuse, for abuse. Yeah.
Right,
So,
because you know how it goes, right? The abuser pushes and provokes the victim until they freak out, and then everybody else is watching that person and going, what's wrong with them? Because they didn't see the abuse happen. Yeah.
But I wanted to make the point with her that what your dad did was criminal, in fact.
Right.
Yeah. So, when I say that, I would protect him sometimes when they would make statements. I would also, not protect him, but, I would, I would agree with maybe a position that he would take. And I say, well, I don't disagree with the position that he's taking. For example, his partner's son was in and out of rehab, and then at some point he had asked the young man to leave. So, they were saying, oh, he's so heartless, and, how can he chuck him out on the street? And I said, no, he's right. If that is what, he's given him enough chance.
Right.
And, if that is how he wants to live his life, then he must go. And he was about 24, 25 years old. He wasn't 18 years old. He was living in his house, and he was on drugs, and he was, he tried to help him, Right. He had him in and out of rehab, and the young man didn't want to help himself. Right. And I said, no, I don't disagree with him. I think he did the right thing. So, I always try to keep like an open mind and the balance. Yeah. Of course, I wasn't always successful, because sometimes I also had my own biases. And I suppose that's normal. Right. And I allowed myself that. But thanks for your advice that, I should have my little pity party hour. So I'll schedule a pity party hour for myself. Right. What time of the day is pity party day time? And maybe just before I go to gym, and then I can go and
work it out. Work it out. Great idea. I like that.
But thanks. Thanks, Meredith.
Make sure that, because your oldest daughter is going to try to triangulate that relationship with your youngest daughter now, make sure that, you're addressing both of them openly, because the last thing you want is for your oldest daughter to go, see, look how mom is ignoring you, or mom wants to have a relationship with me, but not with you, so just make sure that it's equally open for both of them, even though, your oldest daughter is going to try to pull those kinds of triangulation things with you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. There's a message here. It says, Psychopath Free is a brilliant book by Jackson Mackenzie, and it can be got on Amazon in case you can't get it. Have you read that, Psychopath Free?
No, I haven't read any of these books. I haven't,
That's the best one. It is literally a sanity saver. It explains, it's mostly for the person who got into a romantic relationship, You can see through it, if you were in a relationship with a boss or a coworker or a business partner or a friend, but it's really, really on spot for romantic relationships. He explains, exactly the patterns of that relationship. And I'm telling you, you'll read that and go, wow, like that is exactly what happened in my relationship. And it's written by a survivor, and he's just, his perception is uncanny. And that book was wonderful to save my sanity and for so many other people. I really do recommend that. You might have seen the website too, Psychopath Free. There's a lot of information on there from the book. He's written, or a lot of other people maybe have contributed to articles. But it's a fantastic portal. But that book is like the Bible of understanding the relationship with a narcissist.
Okay, I will certainly, I will see if I can get the book. Candy did say that it's available on Amazon.
Yeah, that's where I got it too. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll check with my bookshop, and then if because we have quite a good bookshop here, so I'll check with them. But otherwise, I will check Amazon. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
You're welcome. What other questions do you guys have?
And I don't have any questions really. I just wanted to, kind of talk through what I spoke with you about. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Anybody else have any questions? If you want to unmute your microphone, you can do that too. I think I set it up so that you can unmute yourself or mute yourself. And if you prefer to write it in the chat box, that's fine too. Okay, here's one. I've been thinking since we last chatted, and I'm wondering, how do they keep control even when they are angry? It's almost crazy how just centered and calm, and composed they are. It is unreal how they do that. And I think it's just because they can control that evil, that darkness. Like they don't have the empathy with you, so they're not getting involved in the back and forth emotional connection. They're in control. They're the one manufacturing your emotion. They're the one triggering you to get upset or angry or mad or jealous or sad or devastated or whatever. But I think it's because they're in so much control of that. And that's why they're able to maintain that calmness. And because they don't feel the empathy, they don't get affected by your emotion. They're able to watch you in that state of falling apart, getting angry, getting upset, and they're able to maintain this like total composure and calmness. And that is like one of the most devastating things that happens in public, because that abuser can push you and provoke you to the point where like you lose it in front of other people. And then everybody sees you and they're like, well, she's got an anger problem, or she's got a jealousy problem, or what's wrong with her? And meanwhile, that person's just there and just looking at you, and it's unbelievable. Someone wrote here too, they also use the calm exterior as a tool with which to control both you and the situation. Yeah, they're in control. They can control that darkness inside them. They can control you. They can manufacture your emotion and make it look like it's no big deal. Like it has nothing to do with them, when really they're the one triggering it. They're the one causing it. And that's what allows them to go, undetected by most people in society. And the only people who realize are the ones who are closest, like the intimate relationship or the familial relationship is the only one who gets that burden. Or, at work, it's the one person that they target in the workplace to abuse. And then everybody else is like worshiping them, thinks they're amazing and so charming. And that person? No, they would never do anything like that because they've never seen that side of them. All they see is this very composed, calm person. And it's so unnerving because when they push you to the point of reacting to whatever they're doing, it makes you even more upset to see how calm they are. It's almost like you just want to like rip out your hair because and just like scream at the top of your lungs because you're like, how are you doing that? Like, how is it possible for you to do that? And that's why these relationships are so dangerous for your sanity. You know, it's not always are people in physical risk of harm. It's your mental health, you know, it's your sanity that is usually the biggest risk, because not all these abusers are physical abusers. They're usually psychological abusers, and you can risk losing your sanity. You can risk losing a grip on what's reality. You can risk losing control of your emotions. Like sometimes I get emails and messages from people in that moment when they're about to do something crazy, and they write me and they're like, I'm about to make a mistake, you know, and hurt this person and go to jail for a really long time. I can't get a grip. I can't calm down, you know, and you got to get the person to breathe, to calm down, to come back to center, and to realize that that monster is not worth losing their life, their freedom, their sanity, their health over. You know, and when you're in the moment, it's just so hard, especially when you're in love with that person. It's like extra hard. Or if something big is at risk, you know, maybe it's like your business partner and like your whole career is at risk, or your whole, this endeavor that you're working on, this job that you need, something is like, you know, at major risk, and you can lose it and then have a much worse situation. Someone else wrote here too, the way in which I managed that form of control was by not responding when he was pressing my negative buttons. Yeah, that's definitely the best way to respond, is to not respond. But when you're in the moment, it's the hardest thing to do. Like the hardest thing in the world at that moment is to not respond, to not react in some way, right? And you know, even if you're stuffing it down and controlling it in the moment, and sometimes I was able to do that too, where the person is saying things to get you upset and you just keep breathing through it and you know, but meanwhile you're swallowing all that shit and you need to get rid of that afterward. You know, if you can hold it down in the moment with that person and not let them see you in that state, and then get out of the situation and go cry, go beat your pillow, go run 10 miles, go lift heavy weights, or, you know, whatever it is that you need to do to discharge that in a healthy way so that you don't project it onto someone else who's like an innocent person that doesn't need to take that on, or keep stuffing it down to the point where it makes you physically ill, because it'll get to that point. If you keep swallowing that and keep stuffing it down, it will make you sick, like psychologically or physically in some way. Or, you know, like I said, you can end up accidentally transferring it to someone else who doesn't deserve it just because like it came out. And so, you know, if you can maintain composure in the moment by breathing, like staying in your center and breathing through it, and not let them push you to that point, but realize that, you know, you did stuff it down. You did swallow something, and that is toxic. It is poison, and you need to go, you know, throw that up or in some way, but do it in a healthy way, like whether it's through exercise or just crying it out, you know, by yourself and in private, where that person can't see you and they don't know that they pushed you to that degree, because you don't want to give them that satisfaction. That's what they love, especially the more sadistic ones. They love to see you like that. They love to see you upset. They love to see you sad. They love to see you devastated. You know, that's what they live for. So don't let them win. You know, like if you can just take control of yourself in the moment and calm down, but then find a healthy way of discharging that later, of letting that go so that you don't end up swallowing and keeping that toxin and that poison. What other questions do you have about that or anything else? You're welcome. Yeah, I know it's so unnerving. It's so unnerving to see that. Okay, I arrived home from work one afternoon and my narc husband had pulled up almost all of my plants in my garden. I knew he did it to evoke a negative response. I graciously walked away. Wow. Yeah. Damaging your property, damaging your garden, something that meant something to you. Yeah. Yeah. They love to do stuff like that, and especially like whatever is important to you, whatever they know is important to you, that's what they'll target. And that's what they'll target the hardest. And, you get to a point when you're in these relationships where you don't want to share, if you can't get out immediately and you're stuck in there for a period of time, whether you're at a job and you can't leave that job yet, or you're in a living situation that you can't leave yet, don't let them know what's important to you. Don't let them know what you care the most about. In fact, you can create, what's that word? A decoy, right? So find something you don't really care about and pretend like you care about it. And then watch how they go and attack that thing, But if you create that decoy, then they go in that direction. And then you've got, everything is protected that you actually really, really care about. But they'll do that. They have like an uncanny intuitive sense of what is important to you, what do you care about, and how can they destroy that so they can destroy you. And it's so hard to walk away from that and to not respond, or to sit there when someone's telling you, I love you, but I just really don't love people or get attached to people like you do. And I really wouldn't care if you died or disappeared. Don't give them the satisfaction of knowing how much that hurt. Someone else wrote, I lost it with him once when he made a fool of me in company. I really let him have it when we were alone, and he acted all childlike as if he was scared. Yeah. Yeah. So he embarrassed you in front of other people, or humiliated you in some way in front of other people. Yeah. And then you laid into him when you guys were alone. That was good. That was really good that you were able to hold that down and to not, because the thing is, when you're in front of people, it's like your instinct is to defend yourself, like you want to defend yourself. And that's often the worst thing you can do, because then you end up looking crazy. You end up looking, aggressive, you end up looking violent, you end up looking like you're off your rocker, because they didn't see everything leading up to that. And because of that plausible deniability that they always have, and the way they like to, what they call couching, which is when they disguise abuse as concern, whoa, I was worried about you, or, I was concerned about you, so I did that. And on the surface, the plausible deniability to the outsider who didn't see anything leading up to that would tend to believe that. And when you're rationalizing it to yourself afterwards, that's where the self-doubt comes in and the confusion. Yeah. The indecision, was that abuse? Was it not abuse? Did he mean that in that way that I interpreted it? Or was he just really concerned about me? And it's bullshit, because the couching is always a way of disguising the abuse as concern and care. And that's why it's so tricky. And that's another part of the thing that makes it just like so desperate, and that you just want to freak out and lose it, because there's been all of this leading up to it. And like, how does it look so calm? And how does it look so concerned when that's not it at all? Yes, I often got that too. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting though, that you said, when you were alone, he acted childlike as if he was scared. Was it because you were verbally calling him out on what was happening? Is that what was happening there? When I blew my lid, I let it rip at him. Yes. Yeah, maybe he had never seen that side of you. Maybe he had always known the submissive, you know, going along with it sort of person. And then suddenly, you flip out and you're, letting him have it. And maybe he was a little bit scared for a moment. You said it's like he acted childlike. Maybe it literally triggered him back to the childhood trauma, where one of his parents or caregivers or, someone close to him was punishing him or abusing him in some way. Maybe it just triggered that to him. Maybe that's why you saw that child. Like, I'm curious, after that happened, was there a retaliation? Did he do something much worse after that? Like, after he kind of went away and licked his wounds and came back, did something happen? Usually that's what happens is when you stand up for yourself and you lay into them, you know, even if it's in private, that's when they tend to plot something and come back. Someone wrote here also, they're actually emotionally insecure people. They are. They definitely are. Yes, I get paid back. You mean he retaliated against you? Is that what happened? It was like, if I was looking forward to something, he would ruin it for me. Yes, they love to do that. You got, like, you know, a time set up to go see your friends or to go do something that you love to do, something that's important to you. Maybe you got some big work presentation or something. You have some performance coming up that you have to, like, be on your A game for, and they will come in and ruin it. Like, they will get you, they will do something to knock you off balance. They'll, yes, and act all innocent, like it never happened. Exactly. It is uncanny. And, you know, I think a lot of people who grow up with a narcissistic parent realize this, you know, when they're children, you know, every time something big is coming up, they have some school recital, some, you know, concert that they have to perform at, you know, some party with their friends, you know, maybe it's their birthday party, maybe it's someone else's party, like some event coming up, and the parent will just lay into them right before it happens so that either one, they don't go and they stay home and they feel like shit, or they go and have a horrible time because all they're thinking about was that thing that just happened, you know, and it's just like a way of ruining your joy. And no respect for your time, arriving late when you have to go out on an important meeting or dinner. Exactly. You've got something important to do and they're late, or they have some other excuse, or they show up unprepared for whatever it is that, and you've been telling them in advance. It's not like you were just like the last minute, hey, we got to go do this important thing. Like, you've been telling them this for a while. You've been reminding them. They're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then just the opposite, what they love to do is not tell you anything. They don't include you in any of the plans. And maybe you're sharing a home with them, and then 5 minutes before someone's about to show up, they're like, oh yeah, so-and-so's coming by. And you're like, what? I'm like in my pajamas. Like, I don't have any makeup on. I feel like I look like crap. I just got out of the bed. What do you mean people are coming over? Why didn't you tell me someone is coming over? Or suddenly they're like, hey, we got to go do this thing. And you're like, what do you mean? You never said anything about that. And they expect you just to like run and go do it. And they always love to catch you. It's always in that moment when you're unprepared. Like, either the house is a mess and you're embarrassed to have someone over, or you're a mess and you're embarrassed to be like presentable to someone else. Yeah, they have no respect for your time, for your space, you know, and they will ruin it if it's possible. Like, any shred of joy that you have, they will try to ruin that in any way that they can. And maybe you even like go out to that thing that you have to do, and they know that like either you're giving a presentation or you're working or you go into someone's wedding or whatever, and you're otherwise unavailable. And then they're texting you or they're calling you, and it's about something else, and they're punishing you for something or yelling at you about something, and you're getting all upset, and they've totally ruined your experience there. Someone wrote here, he sat on me one night during an argument and held me down, but said nothing. He didn't even raise his voice, just stared at me. I could never understand that. Yeah, that's really scary. That's like the psychopathic, sociopathic, like, what are they really plotting kind of thing. The silence in staring at you kind of thing is almost more intimidating than when someone is yelling, because then you really wonder what's behind that. You know, a couple weeks ago, I think someone was on here saying that her stalker, her ex-abuser, would just pull up in his car in her driveway and just stare at her house. Like, he wasn't even ringing the doorbell or making a fool of himself yelling outside in the street. Like, he was just staring at her house. Someone else told me that, you know, somebody was doing that at work. Like, he was just staring at the workplace. And that's really creepy. Like, that's like next level creeper kind of thing. And you really, really want to be cautious with people like that, because you don't know, like those are usually the people that snap and do something crazy, like homicide. I would be very, very cautious with that. And I think sometimes it's confusing because you think, well, he didn't do anything. He just sat on me and held me down and stared at me. Well, it really wasn't that bad, and afterward your mind starts like rationalizing like this, and that's really dangerous, because who knows, you got really lucky. You got really, really lucky that you got away, and that nothing happened, in that situation. But that's super creepy, that just lets you know how in control they are, how in control of that evil they are, that they can stuff it down when they need to and be so calm and collected and not even anxious or scared. And then when they want to, they can just channel that right out. Yeah. That's really creepy. Really, really scary. What else do you guys have? Something I'm curious about, I wonder why narcissism is so common in South Africa. I noticed on my Facebook stats, almost 40% of my audience is in South Africa. I think Cape Town is the number one city. The top 4 cities on my list are all in South Africa. And I had thought, initially years ago, that narcissistic abuse was predominantly like an American thing, maybe in the UK too. And I was wondering, do you think it has something to do with the apartheid, with what that was? And, you mentioned that, it was the Black men that were mostly targeted during that kind of abuse. And then is it now that the men are transferring that abuse to the women in their relationships? Like I'm just really curious if you have any insight on that. Someone else wrote here, the whole control thing they have is something I could never get. Yeah, I don't get that either. It is so familiar. My narc husband used to put his weight on my chest, impairing my breathing, and hurl abuse at me. This would be in the morning after the kids had left for school and I would be preparing for work. Yeah, they love to do the morning abuse thing too, because if they get at you first thing in the morning, it's like they set the tone for your whole day. Like your whole day is then based on that. I think I hear your microphone unmuted. Do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, particularly in former years, not so much today, though. I think it's still prevalent today. But in former years, the man was like the man of the house. He was the head of the house, yeah. And because they had suffered so much humiliation under the system that they were unable to protect their families. And often these days, and my husband used to talk a lot about how men have been emasculated in that they don't know their place in society, but he was more, talking about the fact that, I am a feminist, and I don't make apologies for that, and I acted out, and I behave I don't go around saying I'm a feminist. I'm saying it, in a particular context now. Yeah, I believe in equality.
Right.
And so I think particularly South African men haven't come to grips with it, and they feel kind of emasculated, and they don't know their place in society. So, and that was always, kind of where, but he wouldn't say that in when there's an argument. He would say that in a rational conversation. Right. And so women have just left their husbands behind because, we can't wait for them to kind of play catch up, yeah? Right. And because, in fact, like like when I was a kid, we were thrown out of our house. Yeah, the government took of the time. They expropriated our property. Wow. And my dad was, he was one of the few people. My dad was quite an activist. and he refused to move out of the house. And my mother was really scared, because what they were doing at the time was they would just bulldoze your house. Like, you know, you would still be living in the house, and they would just come with the bulldozers. Yeah. So my mother was really scared, and my mother was then the one who, because they had set up what we call townships, to move us to, like kind of reserves, like, you know, get out of here, this is for us, not for you, like declared it whites only. And I think my dad felt very kind of powerless almost,
right,
because they were then the apartheid government, they were then destroying people's homes, as I said, bulldozing it. With you know, you still living in your house and they come with a bulldozer, and you know, and two people where we lived, they got shot. Wow. They got killed. And so my father, you know, had to relent, and he had to move out despite the fact that he resisted. And so I think many men felt that they are they're not living up to the expectation. They're not protecting their family. They're not being the male in the household, and they're not doing the right thing by their family, and and the police would embarrass them also, the white males. They would embarrass them, you know, in fact, they would behave like the narcissists.
Right.
They would do everything to put them down, and they would do this in the presence of their partners, of their kids.
Right. Public humiliation.
So there was a lot of that. And also then when we got moved out from where we were then living on family property, when the land was now expropriated, it caused a lot of social ills in those communities, because, you know, people were totally disorientated. They were thrown together with people who they didn't know, and you had to be really strong in order to survive that.
Right.
And so, as I said, it caused a lot of social ills, and I think that's where the pattern of abuse actually started. That's when maybe it was there prior to then, but when we lived on our family property, I didn't really see that. Wow. When we moved into what we call townships, they're basically ghettos. It was the order of the day. It was like in your face all the time, men beating up their women. You know, it was really bad. And even like when I was growing up, very few women were drinking like kind of alcohol and smoking, and especially doing it publicly. You know, they may have been doing it kind of privately, but then it just became like, you know, like a public thing. They started drinking, and, you know, as I said, it just caused a whole lot of social ills. So there's the excuse, you know, from the abuser to beat up the wife, and, you know, so the whole thing just kind of perpetuated itself.
The legacy of abuse went on.
And then from the Black community. Then from the white community, they were taught to be violent. They were taught from a young age, as soon as they left school, which was like when they're 18 years old, they were forced to go into the army. There was conscription. It was they were forcibly conscripted into the army. You couldn't escape it. You had to go into the army as young males, 18 years old, you know. And so they were taught that in the army, it was drilled into them. They were brainwashed, like, you know, if you see anything black, you shoot, because if you don't kill it, it's going to kill you.
Oh my God.
Yeah. No, it was really, it was equally traumatic and devastating for them. Yeah, though they probably, and I think many white people haven't come to terms with it.
Right.
The fact that it was as traumatic for them as it was for us, though we were the victims at the time, but they were victimized in a different way.
Right.
So yeah, so they were, so the white males were all, they were trained to be violent. So our society was really violent, yeah?
Right.
So these 18-year-old kids, let's say they had to serve 2 or 3 years in the army. So from the age of about 18 to say 21, and I'm particularly talking about the period that when I was at school and when I was at university, they had to, those young men were killing young school kids who were like maybe between the ages of 15 and 18, you know, because those kids were used, you know, in the townships where the school kids were demonstrating.
Wow.
So they also, and I know that in the United States you have the, like this condition of the Vietnam, people having come back from the Vietnam War, yeah? Mm-hmm. And I know that in the United States it's acknowledged and it's recognized. In South Africa it's not acknowledged and recognized. And you find it a lot in what we call the Afrikaner community. And the Afrikaner community being that part of the community that was upholding the apartheid system. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they had to be strong. They had to kill. Yeah, and so it's a very, very violent society that we come from. Yeah.
Where is society at with that now? You know, in like 2016, what's your feeling on that?
We have almost gone full circle where we kind of came out of that at some point 1994, just leading up to 94. We had a lot of violence, a lot of black on black violence, but there was always like kind of a third force by government to, you know, to cause divisions amongst people. And yeah, so there was a lot of that. And then after 1994, you know, we were all very elated, and, you know, we were on this honeymoon trip of ours. And now we have a lot of violence again. And it's not really being addressed. But that's also, we're going through a whole lot of stuff with our president and just the politicians generally, in terms of there's an absolute lack of leadership. Our president should be recalled. I don't know why he's not being recalled, but that's because, you know, there are these other ministers propping him up, because if he were to be recalled or had a fall, then they too would have a fall.
Right.
So, yeah.
Dominoes.
Yeah. So we're going through quite a lot of that at the moment. It's an interesting, albeit a sad part of a young democracy. Yeah.
The violence that you see now, is it like mostly street violence? Is it black against white? Is it domestic violence? Where do you see the most violence happening right now?
The violence, no, it's within the social ills that I referred to. They are contained within these ghettos. Yeah. So there's a lot of drug abuse. And it's mostly as a result of the gangsterism and the drug abuse.
Which has come out of being forced into these areas, forced out of their homes.
Yeah, a whole lot. And also like the unemployment and not opportunities for young people. And so young people start, joining gangs, right, because, that's where they see, these people driving smart. Okay, now I can hear you.
Okay, good.
Yeah, okay, we can talk now again. Yeah, the kids had to be, couldn't go to school because there was just so much violence in their neighborhoods, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so kids were kept away from school. Yeah, and, and how does that child come out of the system,
right,
at the end of their school year? Because instead of focusing, even with the teachers, it's very hard to be a teacher in South Africa, especially if you're teaching in those schools, yeah? Because instead of just focusing on, like the lesson for the day, they have to deal with a whole lot of social issues with the kids.
right.
So, and also the classes are really big. I remember when I was at school, when I was in the 7th grade, there were 60 of us, 60 in one class.
Wow.
Yeah. And about 50% will get through. Yeah.
50%.
Because 50% of the kids will get through, because you can imagine if a teacher has 60 kids.
Right.
Yeah. And even if 40 or 50 of them got through that grade, they're not going to get through the next higher, because much, in the lower grade, that they're actually not going to be on. Just by way of example, when we go to high school, we go to grade 8, yeah? And there were probably maybe about 200 kids in grade. But by the time we got to matric, our last year of school, there were about 40 of us.
Wow.
So, yeah, out of 200, yeah.
Wow.
Who entered, 40, yeah, came out of the system, yeah. And then of the 40, probably only 20 of us, got into, maybe university or into a profession, or, where we could, move to another level, if you like, yeah.
Right. To further your education.
And if I look at, well, not necessarily further your education, even if you went and, went to go and work and get into a trade or something, that was also okay. There was one young man who was he was a kid. He was in the same class with me, and he was brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant. And when he left school, I think we were together first year at varsity, but I think he didn't come back in the second year. But even when he was at school, he was already drinking alcohol. The environment that he came from was really disturbing. And so for somebody like him to even have got to that level, of education, I thought, it was almost like admirable that he managed to get to that level of education. Yeah. Right. I don't know what happened to him subsequent to then, but I don't think he got very far in life, even though he managed to finish his basic schooling, because I think his environment just got too much for him, at that stage. Yeah. So, yeah. So people are not just poor economically, there's like poverty of spirit as well.
Right.
And that for me, that is the bigger problem for me.
Right.
Not the economic poverty, but the poverty of spirit for me is the bigger problem. Mm-hmm.
Right, because it was like beaten out of them, like going back to how they were treated, how their property was taken away. They were told they had no right to live there. They were forced to go live in these areas. And that's going to kill the spirit of someone, right? And then if that person doesn't heal from that trauma, they're going to pass the abuse on, to their wife, to their family, to like the neighbor. And then it goes on and on and on.
Yeah. In fact, last week, there was this woman interviewed on radio, and she's a social worker. She works for an NGO. She's the CEO of this NGO. I don't know if you know, NGO is the non-government organization. Yeah, you have NGOs, yeah. And she has these young social workers working with her. And she says she works in schools, yeah? And last week, she had to make the decision about keeping the kids, these young people, these social workers, in the system, in the school system, or sending them home for their own safety. Because now they are in this area where, there's like shooting of guns and just random shooting and fighting and, gangs fighting with each other.
In the school?
And at school, wow. Yes. And in the streets. Yeah, in the streets. I mean, when they do these things, they don't care where they are, and they don't know who, they don't care who's affected in the crossfire, yeah?
Right.
So, she said the principal called her and said to her, the kids in grade 1 are crying. Can you please send some of your people, to come and calm the kids down? And she said she has to make that decision now, Does she send her social workers out there? Or does she keep them at the office so that, they don't get caught in the crossfire? Mm. And there's another woman, she feeds the kids, and this is out of her own pocket, yeah? And she works as a receptionist. And even the best paid receptionist, I mean, doesn't get paid a lot of money. And from her own money and her husband's money, they feed, I think she said 26 children every day. Wow. Yeah, they live in this area, so they feed these kids. And so last week, her colleague actually phoned in to the radio to say that she had asked if she could leave the office early, because the kids would go to the house to go and get the food from them at home. But because there were these gang fights, she didn't want the kids to come to her house. So she asked if she could leave early because she needed to go and drop off the food for these kids in their different homes where they live. So you find that there's a lot of goodwill, and human capital.
Right.
There's an enormous amount of human capital in this country. And if we can just get certain things right, especially at government level, everybody can fly. And especially because we have all of this human capital. Yeah.
I've thought about that a lot too. And, here too, like, I think, a lot of times most Americans and a lot of the world thinks that everything is amazing in the United States, and that's not true at all. We have millions of homeless children, and like 13 or 15 million children are food insecure, meaning they don't know where their next meal is coming from. And I feel like we're at this point now where we need to stop relying on the government to fix it, because that's just a big mess. And it's like, there's no way to fix that system. So what about circumventing the system? You know, the people who have the skills and the gifts and the desire to help, and then the people who have the money, you know, like we have tons of millionaires and billionaires here who made their money, you know, as entrepreneurs or in the tech industry or something. And they're looking to invest or, you know, donate money somewhere as a charity. And then there's the people who have the skills and the willpower and the desire to do that. And what if we merge these two parts of society and we completely circumvent that whole mess that's happening in the government and the system, where the people come together and the people help one another? I really think that's the only way forward. I think to keep hoping for change to come from within that system wasn't meant to do that. It wasn't, I don't think
not designed.
No, it's not designed. And rather than wasting so much energy, you know, and lives really, you know, trying to fight that system, can't we just circumvent that and bring together the right people and the right resources to help one another to move forward in a healthy way? You know, I think that's the only way forward. I really do.
Yeah. But you know, you can only win. Like in South Africa, of course, you know, we have some foundations, and then we also get quite a bit of money from international investors, including from the United States. But you know, we always like kind of have a begging bowl out there, and it shouldn't be necessary because there's enough to go around. Yeah,
that is what is so mind-boggling. You know, how are there millions of empty homes that were foreclosed and millions of homeless people? How are there so many people with so much money and so much abundance and so many people starving? You know, it doesn't make any sense. Here, I find there's a big divide between those less off and those with money. There is, and there's an ever bigger divide. You know, it seems like that middle class phenomenon is disappearing around the world. You know, and what you're finding is a big polarization, you know, the haves and the have-nots. And I think, you know, if the humanity within the people would just awaken and realize that, you know, we've been taught, you know, the divide and conquer thing, right? You know, like you mentioned earlier, we've been taught that, and we've been taught to hate one another and be fearful of one another and to be hoarding of what we have, you know, whether it's our service that we're offering or whether it's our money that we're offering or however we contribute to that. And can we not just find other ways of bringing the money and the resources together, you know, to help everyone? I really feel like we have to come up with these ideas, like the NGOs and, you know, these sorts of ideas, just other charities that people put together where you get an investor and then people who want to work and put something together. It says, it's the same here. People can be so mean, much once more. Yeah, that's greed. That's human greed, right? Yeah, and I think like people have forgotten, you know, we've been so distracted to focus on production and consumption, and that being the only viable and valuable state of consciousness, that people have forgotten the interconnectedness of things. People have forgotten what's real, and we're taught to only see the superficial things, you know, and we forget that, you know, we're only in this life for so long. And when we leave this life, what are we taking with us? We're not taking our money, our possessions, our physical beauty, none of that's real. We take what's in our heart, you know, the memories that we make, what we've shared with others, the love, you know, those experiences. That's the only thing that goes with us, you know, after this. And I think we need to redirect our focus onto what's meaningful and what matters. Someone says, it's sad to see the homeless and those who have money, etc., can walk right past them. Yeah, yesterday I took a different walk with my dog. I went the opposite direction. I walked 10 blocks. In those 10 blocks, there were no less than 7 people who asked me for money, who asked me for something. And it's like, that was just like a 10-minute walk. You know, it's unbelievable what's happening. And, you know, there's just so many people that are like, well, not my problem. I'm sorry, you're not successful. I've heard that so many times. And I just want to smack those people and be like, wake up. Like, wait, what makes you different than them? You know, like, I'm not saying you didn't work hard to get to where you were. You probably worked really hard to be successful money-wise, you know, but Like, let's talk about success in a bigger picture too. Like, what are you contributing to this world? You know, how do you feel in your heart, in your mind at the end of the day? You know, and can't we just help each other out more? I really think that that's the only way forward.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, the thing is that, you know, even if each one just did something for one other person or one family, you know, it makes such a big difference, you know, in the lives of those people. Yeah. So, you know, perhaps you can't, you know, see to 7 or 10 people, you know, but if you just kind of adopted a family or even just one person, and you make a difference in that person's life.
Right.
And you know, in that regard, you know, I think that I've been quite lucky maybe in that regard, in that when I was at school, there was a family that lived in what we would call, you know, like a suburb, and I lived in what we call a township or the ghetto. And this family, and they were quite a big family, and the daughter and I were in the same class. And the mom used to send them weekends to come and pick me up and take me to their house. And then, you know, I spend the weekend with them. And then they would take me back home on the Sunday again. And, you know, I've always appreciated what they did, you know, and I've always told them how much it meant to me that they kind of took me into their home.
Right.
And they showed me kind of a different world and a bigger world out there, because most of the kids who grow up in the ghettos, you know, that's their world.
Right.
Yeah. And especially when you see photographs of Cape Town, and I'm sure you have seen, you know, because we're quite good at marketing ourselves. And you see how beautiful, you know, like the ocean and the mountain and these houses up against the mountain, and, you know, how spectacular the waterfront looks, you know. But that's not the reality of the people who live in the township, yeah. Their reality is very different.
Right. Very stark contrast to that.
Yes. So yeah, you know, so, you know, I say, you know, we can't save everyone, but, you know, just if you can make the difference in the life of just one family, you can do so much more. Yeah.
You are exactly right with that. I read in one of Dan Millman's books, it might have been like The Way of the Peaceful Warrior or the sequel of that. But his teacher in Hawaii, she was a kahuna teacher. They're walking on the beach and there were tons of starfish stranded on the beach, like thousands. And she started picking up and throwing back in the ocean and throwing back. And he was like, what are you doing? Like, we'll never, I mean, we could work for days and we'll never save all these starfish. What does it matter? And she goes, what does it matter? What does it matter to this one? What does it matter to this one? You know, everyone go back in the water. And I think that is the message. And I think that's why so many people don't do anything, because they feel like it's so daunting. There's just so much. It's so overwhelming. You can't solve everything. But like you said, if you can help one person, if you can help one family, you have made a difference in someone else's life.
Yeah. You know, I'm not saying this because I want to blow my own trumpet, but when my kids were younger, I had a babysitter for them. And she had 2 sons who were exactly the same ages as my daughters. Her 2 sons and my 2 daughters are the same age. And whenever we used to go on holiday, then, you know, I would take her and her 2 kids with us as well, because it was the only way in which they could have a holiday. Besides that, well, I also had ulterior motives, because then I didn't have to look after the kids. I could go on holiday.
It worked out for everybody. I find the poor or those less off are the ones who will stop and give them something, because we know what it's like to be without. Exactly.
True. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but anyway, what I also did was, you know, I sent them to kind of decent schools, the boys, I sent them to decent schools, and I paid their school fees, and and so on. And they both went on to go and study at university. When they got to university, they got scholarships to study, so I didn't have to pay for that. So they got scholarships for university. But the point I'm making is that it had made such a big difference in their life. And it was a small price to pay. It wasn't a big sacrifice for me to make, to say, look, I want your kids to have the same education that my kids are having. I want to give them the same opportunities that my kids have,
Right.
And they lovely young men. And the day she stopped working for me a long time ago, but we have a different relationship now. We're friends, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we have tea, or we go to a soccer match together, and and so on. But it's so nice to be like part of the family, and she's part of our family, and the kids are part of my family. And she doesn't forget my children's birthdays. In fact, even when they were little, with the little money that she had, because she was working for me at the time, and she wasn't earning a crap load of money, but she would make sure that when it's one of my daughters, when it's their birthday, that she would buy a gift for them.
Aww.
She would always get a gift for them, on their birthday,
Right.
And as I said, and her sons turned out to be so, they're really great. And if she had to stop working now, they would be able to see to her, to support her, simply because they are now able to hold better jobs than they will have held if they didn't have a decent education.
And not only the education, but the perspective that you allowed them to have, that you helped them to develop, the perspective of possibility and what they can accomplish in life.
So it's just, and it's not a big sacrifice to make, just to say, look, I have to help a family. So we, as I said, we have quite a lot of, the human capital in our country, and we're grateful for that. Because I was the recipient of that kind of human capital. There was a family who thought that, that I should see a different side to life than what I was exposed to just being at home.
And now you're passing it forward. You're helping other people. Help other people, hopefully.
It
really is the way forward. I really think that's the answer to things. Start small. What can you do? What can each one of us do? This was a wonderful conversation today. I really want to thank you both for your perspectives, and it was so fascinating to hear about the state of things in South Africa, and your perspectives on how that was coming about and everything. And I really appreciate all of your input. I think I hear some typing. Yes. Okay. Yes. Thank you. Thank you to all of you. I'm going to wrap this up now. We went a little over time today. Thank you so much for contributing. And I'll be posting this on YouTube, and I'll be back here in about 4.5 hours, or I will see you next week.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And good night.
Okay, bye.
Well, it's good night from my side. It's 10:30 at night. All righty. Bye.
Bye.